All right,
How are we going?
here we are. Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Ben Lustig.
Good morning, world. I am, as you can see, I'm Jake's medulla oblongata. Ben was like, "What is that?" I was like, "I don't actually know. It's a Fight Club reference, but turns out it's that core part of your brain. Is it the reptilian brain? Something like that."
I don't know. You got me, man.
Anyway, here we are, Wednesday, 14th of September, 2022.
Yes.
The third
Welcome
episode.
to episode 3.
Yes, Ben and Jake write a movie in which we, Ben Lustig and Jake Thornton, Hollywood screenwriters, are going to crack from the ground up a brand new spec screenplay. That meaning nobody has asked us to write this. We're writing it speculatively in the hopes that it will sell. It's what many screenwriters do to generate their original ideas and sell original material. And it's what we're going to be doing live on YouTube.
Yes.
Are we doing this on Facebook as well?
We're on Facebook and YouTube right now, and Twitch. Haven't decided whether we should do it on Twitter yet. Trying to still work all these kinks and figure it out. If you have any comments about where you would probably prefer to watch this, leave them for us.
Do this.
And also, if you have any feedback about ways that we can make this better of an experience for everyone, that would be great too. And of course, we are always here to answer any questions related to screenwriting. Not all questions are appropriate.
Let's specify them. Just to screenwriting or the entertainment industry as we might understand.
Yes. But we're happy to be here today. And if you haven't watched our previous 2 episodes, go ahead and check them out. They are how we got to today. And just to do a quick recap, we did come up with an idea that at the moment I'm excited about. We'll see how long that lasts.
At the
moment I'm excited about it. And basically we said, it's like the Terminator meets Midnight Run, but with a demon. And it could be really fun. We'll see. Let's start right off with talking about our homework that we gave each other for last night. One of the things we do like to do is watch movies as a form of research, as well as filling the well for the style and tone of what we're working on. So, Jake, you want to kick it off?
Sure thing. So, obviously, if the comps we're making are it's Terminator meets Midnight Run, we should watch both Terminator and Midnight Run. So, Ben watched the Terminator last night, and I watched Midnight Run. I watched it a few years ago as well. And it actually, when I watched it a few years ago, it was the first time I'd ever seen it. I'd not seen it when it first came out or on VHS or DVD back in the day. So it was nice to see it again, actually, knowing what it was and with the mind of going, what works well in this movie. So for those of you who don't know Midnight Run, it stars Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin, as well as a bunch of other people as well, including Joe Pantoliano, Cypher from The Matrix. And I probably just butchered his last name. Sorry, Joey.
Joey Pants.
Joey Pants.
Joey Pants.
That's his name. My father-in-law knows him. But yeah, anyway. And the concept of the movie is this lawyer has done one over on the mob and stolen, I think it's $15 million, and was in jail for, I think, some offense, and was bailed out by Joey Pants, who plays a bail bondsman, and he just runs off and he leaves. And so Robert De Niro, who is the protagonist of the movie, his job is to go and find these people who've skipped bail and bring them in. And so Joey Pants goes to him and says, I will pay you a very large sum of money, which Robert De Niro gets up to be $100,000, which I'm sure in the early 90s was even now, and agrees to go and get Charles Grodin's character, the Duke, as he's called. And so he tracks him down to New York, finds him and apprehends him, and then starts the process of getting him from New York to Los Angeles. I think it's over the course of what should be 5 days. He starts going, I'll do it by tomorrow. But there is a ticking clock. It needs to be done by Friday at midnight. So ultimately, from minute one, not minute one, but from the moment that is laid out, you understand the time frame of this movie. If I get Charles Grodin, if I get the Duke to LA by midnight on Friday, I will have experienced victory.
Yeah.
And so what we learn, though, is that the FBI are also after the Duke because they want to bring him on. They want to use him as a witness to take down Serrano, who is the mafia guy who Charles Grodin screwed over. And then the mafia also want him because they don't want him testifying in court at any level. And then also when things start to go awry with the job, another quote unquote bounty hunter is sent after him as well. So in the middle of all this too, though, you learn that this mafia boss, Serrano, is the guy responsible for he is essentially De Niro's ghost. And by ghost, I mean the thing that happened in the character's past that still stays with them in some way, something they've been able to let go of. So what you learn is that years ago, De Niro used to be an undercover cop in Chicago, and that he was investigating this heroin dealer, and then all of a sudden, his fellow cops discovered 7 pounds of heroin in his house, and it was, you're going to go to prison, or you can go on the payroll of this heroin dealer, like every crooked cop in Chicago, or you can leave town. And ultimately, he chose the latter and left town and was forced to leave his wife and his child. And so you have this thing about taking down this guy, although that's not what he goes into it with. He doesn't go into it with the intention of taking down the guy. He goes into it with, I'm just going to bring Charles Grodin back to LA by Friday. That's what he does as his job. And you learn it's because he still wants to hunt criminals and do something good for the world. So it's born out of something good. But he's definitely, he kind of plays with legality, and does things very much his own way. Anyway, but at the core of this movie is the relationship between Robert De Niro and the Duke, played so well by the late, great Charles Grodin. And it's interesting. I was just thinking a little bit this morning and thinking a little bit about our story. And it'll probably get philosophical about life, but that in a movie, like, the best movies happen and the best outcomes happen because characters are exposed to the circumstances that they most need to change themselves and become better versions of themselves. They are metaphors for life. And I truly believe that about story, that we are exploring our shared humanity through the telling of stories. I'm a deep believer in that. And that ultimately, what happens with Robert De Niro through going to Charles Grodin, he goes to Charles Grodin and so pulls him along. But Charles Grodin is always giving him a hard time. He says he can't get on the plane at first, so they have to get a car. And then they can't do that. They have to go on a train. But all the time, Charles Grodin is probing him and asking him difficult questions like, why do you do this? What is it that you really like about your job? Going out and finding criminals of all levels, whether you think they're innocent or not, why are you doing this? And gets into, I was forced to leave Chicago. I don't have a good relationship with my wife. Why don't you have a good relationship with your wife? Well, because this thing. And it doesn't come out instantly. He has to pry it out of him. But that ultimately, over the course of the story, and you never know if it's going to be ultimately that De Niro is going to let him go or not. But ultimately, what ends up happening is they end up successfully taking down the mafia boss, Serrano, who is ultimately the cause of all of the problems, both in Duke's life and ultimately in De Niro's life of Jack as well. And then at the end, they've taken down Serrano, and he puts the cuffs back on the Duke and gets him on a little plane and takes him to LA. And you're like, man, after everything they've been through, is he really going to give this guy to Joey Pants's bail bondsman?
Yeah.
And he gets to Los Angeles airport and he goes, I just wanted to get you here so that I've been successful, but I'm not going to turn you over. And it's only in that last moment do you go, oh, great. The thing that was right.
Sure.
All the other success had happened. You'd taken down that guy. You're given an enormous amount of money by Charles Grodin, who you discover had it on him all along. He's got $300,000 in a money belt around his waist. And he gives him this money because he ultimately wants to get out of this life and start a little coffee shop or a restaurant, something like that.
Okay.
But it's in that very like you genuinely don't know if Jack Walsh has succeeded in his emotional journey of becoming, like, giving up that life, becoming a better version of himself until the very, very, very last moment. And ultimately, he does it without promise of reward.
Interesting. He does it without promise. I thought he had $100,000 reward.
Okay, but that's from Joey Pants.
Okay. So because he doesn't give him to Joey Pants, he doesn't get the $100,000.
But he does get the $300,000 that Charles Grodin then gives him as a thank you. But it's interesting because he doesn't ever go. He said, Charles Grodin says early on in the story, well, what if I gave you $200,000 to let me go? And he's like, I've never taken a payoff. I never will.
So he chooses at the end to let him go, but he doesn't do it for a payoff, and then he gets the payoff anyway.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And actually, it's so satisfying because of that. Because you go, you're doing this for the right reasons. You're doing this because you see that this guy was doing something good.
Sounds like a bit of a classic, like, good guy. Robert De Niro's character, like, almost to the point of, like, he had that thing in his past that you're talking about, but he seems very kind of straight edge.
But it's funny because he's very rough around the edges. He works for this scumbag bail bondsman.
Right.
You don't go into going, you're an upstanding private.
Sure. He's not a U.S. Marshal. Right.
No, absolutely not. He feels like, a Jake Gittes from Chinatown type guy. Like, some go, you're not the, just the way he dresses, the way he is, the way he carries himself, the way he treats the criminals in his custody. He knocks people out, punches people. Like, he's not a awesome, upstanding guy.
Sure.
He's the guy who's willing to really bend and break the rules to get what he wants, which at the start is just money.
Right.
But then you realize that he has this bigger dream. And we've talked about this a lot over, even recently.
The money goal.
The money goal. And what you have with a character who just wants money.
It's difficult because you don't care if there's not something more to them. Like, I don't really care if someone gets rich. Totally. It might start that way, but you lose my attention if it's just about getting rich.
Totally. And what we've discussed recently, isn't it, is it's what does that money mean and represent? Yeah. And what it means and represents to Jack Walsh is the leaving behind of his old life and the start of something new.
And do they give you a reason why that's so important?
Not that you feel like enormously emotionally connected to, I will say that. But you do go, oh, here's this rough around the edges, bail hunter, bounty hunter type dude, who, as you get into the story, you learn doesn't want to do this anymore. And he wants to.
So eventually you get to, how long do you think in the movie does it take for us to feel that way?
It's probably somewhere in 2.1.
Okay.
Or the
Okay.
latter half of 2.1. So by
Sure.
2.1, we mean the first half of Act 2, 45 minutes to an hour into this particular movie. But yeah,
Interesting.
in a 2-hour movie. And there's
Right.
something interesting as well that I'll add. He has this watch, and the watch becomes an object through which his emotional journey is played.
Mm.
And you see it very early on in the movie. He's got this watch, and the watch doesn't work properly. He's always having to wind it. And then you learn that his ex-wife gave him this watch.
Right.
And his connection to, and even Charles Grodin says, "I'll buy you a new watch." And he's like, "No, I don't want a new watch. You know, this is the thing that it reminds me of my first date with her, whatever it was."
Okay.
He does. Anyway, and in the final moment, he's about to leave the airport, and he takes his watch off. He goes up to Charles Grodin and goes, "Little something to remember me by." And you feel that he has released his past. He's released the attachment and the sadness of his failed marriage, and the sadness of having to leave and be pushed out of the Chicago PD, all in that very simple moment of handing.
Why do you think? I mean, like something we talk about a lot is this Act One need to not just like your character, and that doesn't mean that they have to be a good person. It just means that you like them, and thus want to go on this journey with them, but also that you care that they win. What do you think about? I mean, and maybe there isn't, but like, is there a reason that you want De Niro to succeed? You know, and then my other question would be: is Charles Grodin an equal protagonist in his own way, or is he not at all in that movie?
So first question about why do we care that he wins? So I see in the opening moments he's hunting down some dude who has skipped bail, and so I see, he is doing something good.
Okay.
He's not a criminal. He's doing something good. He brings this guy in.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, so he's a good guy.
But also, you see that he's kind of down on his luck. And that he is...
Okay, we like underdogs.
And we like underdogs.
Yeah, okay.
And you just kind of feel, that he goes in to Joey Pants and he says, "I'm here for the money." He's like, 900, right? And he's like, "No, you said it was 12. And you just kind of feel that he's always being skipped by this guy in some small little way. So that's why I would say that
we sympathize for him.
We sympathize with him. We go, but it's not like you immediately go into, I've got a daughter who I haven't seen in 9 years.
Sure. Do you see, like, does he have a shitty apartment or a shitty car? Or all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Do you see that he has a shitty car? I don't remember feeling emotionally attached to that, nor do I remember going to his apartment. But those would be ways in which you could show here is someone who is just getting by. The classic, and we pan by and see a stack of unpaid bills is probably the cliche way of doing it. Here's someone who needs money because they're in a difficult situation. I can't say that I felt that was enormously established, but I still felt like I wanted him to win. I did still feel that.
Okay.
He had become me. I'd become that character in the first 5 minutes. He was one who I was connected with, that I cared about.
And De Niro is pretty fucking charismatic. So, and that's sometimes that can be solved sometimes just by the actor.
Absolutely.
With a great performance, you're going to want them to win because you just love them.
Completely.
Yeah. So
with
James
regards
Hathaway,
to Charles Grodin and being the second protagonist.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
He is the second protagonist. I would say that he more feels like the character who is there to help Robert De Niro change. In certain movies, the kind of angel / traveling angel, depending on the...
It's interesting. It's almost a reverse of the movie of the Terminator that I was watching. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. But through Charles Grodin, through the Duke, he really changes. He has a great moment where he is able to kind of use similar tactics that Jack Walsh uses to kind of hustle a bar out of some money when they haven't got any
Okay.
money. So, but again, I don't feel that Charles
Doesn't really have an arc necessarily or journey
at the end as he was at the beginning. But
Sure.
definitely.
It's interesting. Yeah. Very similar actually to the Terminator. Just want to pause one sec. James asks if we happen to have these on Apple products. We do have a podcast through Apple Music. We are posting these as just audio.
I think we got one yesterday. I don't think we got. I think you
we
said
didn't get yesterday's on, but we will. I don't know if Apple has a video, like a vlogging feature. James, if you know of one, let me know.
I don't think so.
So it's interesting. Everything you're saying, I think, really can apply to the movie that we're talking about in terms of the multiple antagonists, in terms of the character growth of the protagonist, as well as the kind of arc that he goes on. The Terminator, which was my homework last night, which I don't know that I have to give too much of a breakdown in terms of the story. Most people have probably seen the Terminator. If you haven't seen the Terminator, I pity you. But if you haven't seen the Terminator,
it's a movie from 1986.
That is true. I guess we are. I guess I'm really old, and in theory, some people may not have seen the Terminator. So, Terminator. Quick breakdown. In the future, the machines have taken over and humanity is about to fall. But there's one freedom fighter that could be the end of the machines. And thus, the machines send back in time Arnold Schwarzenegger as a Terminator to kill the mother of said one person so that he is never born. At the same time, that person, John Connor, sends back his own soldier to protect his mother from the Terminator so that he can be born. That is the story. That is the entire.
Well, there's that little twist in the middle, isn't there?
Well, yes, I would say that is the concept.
Yes.
The story does have complications, and that's actually a really good point. And I think that was one thing that is really great about the Terminator, is that it is a really simple concept.
Yes.
I mean, like really, really simple. Well, it has, it's time travel and shit. Like, it's a chase movie. Bad guys coming after us. John Connor's mother needs to be saved. Good guy saves her, or attempts to save her. And that is the arc of this classic movie. But interestingly, going into it and watching it in the way that I did, there's a lot more to it than that, which is really kind of cool. And I think that as much as we think of it as really, really simple, as you're saying, even the big plot twist that we learn later on in the movie is that actually the guy that John sends back is his father. And what we even learn later is that he knows that. And so he sends his father back to meet his mother. So there's a dual agenda. Not only does he have to protect his mother's life, but he has to have sex with her.
Doing it for the future.
Which is kind of weird, because you go, how do you make that happen? But it's a time travel thing. And you go, oh, like you kind of just go, oh, if he had never sent, and even Sarah Connor says this at the end, like it's hard to wrap. She says it's hard to wrap your head around these things. Had you never sent Reese back, you had never been born. And yet, had you never been born, you would never have sent Reese back.
Of course, it could go crazy.
And this is, one of the problems sometimes with time travel movies, is that they don't fully make sense, and yet you just kind of go with it, and that's okay. But there were some things. So I like to take notes on my iPad as I do things, and I actually kind of clocked it out. I like to look at structure as well, and like where at what minute and are things happening. And what I realized, which was really interesting, so there's no question after watching it again that Sarah is your main protagonist in this movie, as well as the stakes character, which is also an interesting observation because it's not always the case. In fact, most of the time when we write movies, we think of our protagonist going after the stakes character.
Can you define what you mean by stakes character?
So stakes character meaning the essentially really the person who is at stake because of the action of the movie. And sometimes in an action movie, most of the time it's like that person's either going to die, that person is
Bruce Willis's wife in Die Hard.
Yeah, his wife in Die Hard, the daughter in Taken, those kinds of characters. There's not always a stakes character.
No.
There are sometimes just stakes, world stakes. But there's always stakes in the movie, and that is really important. You got to identify, well, like, what is at stake if this hero does not succeed.
Totally. Yes.
And it's actually quite interesting. And there are other movies like this. We were just talking about Crank the other day.
Right.
But like whereby the hero and the stakes character are the same person.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so that was interesting.
I'm doing this to save my life.
Yeah. And that saving my life is really what this movie is about.
Right.
And that we don't meet Sarah Connor until 12 minutes into this movie, which was fascinating.
Isn't that funny? That's not my memory of it at all. So do you see Arnie and Kyle Reese arrive before you meet her?
Yes. So it's really interesting. So you don't know anything. So first of all, just like your movie, and this is also really good to observe, they set up the timeline right away. Cameron has the first thing you see is an image of the future. You don't really know what's going on, but then you have words over black. And in the words over black, it tells you everything you need to know. But most importantly, it tells you that this fight for the future will happen tonight.
I always know
it's happening tonight. And we know from that moment that the clock is going to be ticking from the time the movie begins. Right? The fate of the world is happening now. This isn't going to be a movie that lasts months. It's happening now. So that was cool. But then you do start right off the bat with Arnold. Also, I did not remember this. You don't know he's a Terminator.
That's
right. You don't know he's a robot.
Yeah.
You don't know any. He's literally a guy, a huge guy who's crazy strong, but he also looks crazy strong.
Right.
So when he goes up against
Bill Paxton in that opening moment.
I love Bill Paxton. But when he goes up against Bill Paxton and he throws him against the fence, you're not going, oh, that guy's a robot. You're just going, who the fuck is this?
Like an Arnold Schwarzenegger. Look at the size of him.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was actually a really interesting observation.
Is he doing a thing where he bends metal? Am I doing that right, or in the completely conflicting with another movie?
You mean like where he like bends the shotgun thing?
Yeah.
I don't.
Or is that in the second one?
I think that's in the second one. I don't remember him doing that.
Sure.
But if he does, it's not in the first 12 minutes of the movie.
Right.
And you see him do his thing, and he's mean. And so you go, okay, this might be the bad guy.
Yes.
You've also seen the poster, and this is something we talk about all the time too. Is like, no one's going into this movie not having seen some sort of promotional aspect of it.
But regardless, the content of the movie is, he kills 3 innocent people the moment he gets there.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're not saying this is our hero, right? You're not thinking he's our hero. Plus, what Cameron does is with music, and music is so important in this movie and so many others. Because of the imposing dun, 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 dun. Like this is your bad guy, right?
Yeah.
But then, so we see him get his clothes, and we meet him and see what he's capable of, and then we meet Reese, and Reese shows up the same way that Arnold does, but he's smaller. He's meeker. He's got scars on his body.
And he hurts, doesn't he, when he comes out of that time bubble?
It's like, not like crazy hurting. It's not like it's just like he's more disoriented, and he's more like
He's acting human as well, isn't he?
He's acting human, yes.
Yeah.
So whereas Arnold is acting like a robot, but we don't know he's a robot,
Yeah.
very quickly is acting human. And in fact, we stay with him where he grabs a cop's gun and he points the gun at the guy and he's like, "Where am I and what year is it?" And you go, "Oh, these are both people from the future."
Yeah,
but
sure.
and they're probably on opposing sides. I'm smart enough to know that Reese is the good guy and Arnold's the bad guy.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is if you've never watched the movie before, you think, "Oh, there's your protagonist and your antagonist." You don't actually know what their mission is, and you don't actually know anything other than they're both from the future.
Right.
But at 12 minutes in, we meet Sarah Connor.
Before that, has Arnie taken out any of the Sarah Connors?
So no.
Okay.
So we do see, I believe, trying to look at my notes here, we see a phone book moment.
Yes, he goes to the phone booth, he tears out a page.
And I believe it even zooms in on the name Sarah Connor. But at this point in the movie, we don't know who she is.
We don't know what that means.
We have no idea what that means. We just know he's looking for someone. And we're assuming that because we focused in on the name Sarah Connor, that it's probably that person. But we have no idea who that is. And then 12 minutes into the movie, we meet her. And we meet her. We learn her name is Sarah, but not Connor. But we're assuming, okay, I get it, it's Sarah.
Yeah.
And right away, we're seeing her in her job. She's a normal person. And this is what we were talking about in terms of what we want to do with our movie. She's not a skilled person. She's a waitress. And she's not great at her job, or at least her job's not fun. It kind of sucks. And we really get a sense very quickly for like, this is just a woman. And we don't know why he was looking at her names. We haven't established the plot yet of what the war for the future of humanity even means. We don't even know that the Terminators are coming to kill John Connor's mother at all at this point, But we're building tension. And that's what's interesting, right?
And I just want to add something, just to clarify. By just a woman, it could also be just a man, just a non-special person,
a character.
Yes,
she's just a person.
She's just a person without any special skills living their life. That just to clarify.
Yes, I wasn't being.
I know you weren't. Yes,
she is a woman.
She is a woman.
So if she was just a man, that would also be something very unique that we would be discovering about her character.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is that all the way through. So even like 17 minutes in, we know very clearly by that point that Arnold is the villain and that Reese is good, even though we've suspected it before. But we still don't even know what a Terminator is. There's a moment in there where we now, 22 minutes into the movie, we meet these cops. And again, so similar to what you're talking about in
Night Run.
Midnight Run, there are multiple factions at play here. You have, and you don't know all of their intentions. You actually don't know Reese's intention yet.
Yeah.
So you've met Sarah, you've met Arnold, you've met Reese, and then you meet these cops, right?
And the cops are investigating the fact that people called Sarah Connor have been killed.
Right. Well, you meet them. Yes, you meet them, and you go, at this point, hey, there's these two people with the name Sarah Connor. Exactly. And that's why we've seen now Arnold kill one of the Sarah Connors, which is why we clearly know that he's the bad guy. So it's not until 27 minutes that Sarah sees the news that people are killing Sarah Connors.
Is it work or something like that, isn't it? Isn't she at work and like her friend says, check this out?
Her date canceled on her, and she goes to a movie, and then we see her in a restaurant. And on the TV behind the bar, she goes, "Wait a minute, what's going on?" At work, she finds out about one Sarah Connor death, and her employee or her friend is like, "Oh, you're famous, Sarah," but they're not thinking anything of it because it's just one.
You're famous,
Sarah and her acknowledgement of what is going on happens about half an hour into the movie. Um, and then around the same time, Arnold gets 33 minutes, like 6 minutes later, Arnold hears the voicemail knowing where she is.
Gotcha.
And so the tension is building, right? And so we're right about the end of Act 1, and we get the big club fight scene, which is our big climax of Act 1, right? And that's the whole "come with me if you want to live" moment. We really truly know at this point that Sarah's life is in danger, that Arnold is coming after her, and that Reese is there to help her, but we still have no fucking clue why.
Right.
We have no idea why. And that's when, so by 39 minutes in, we are 40 minutes into this movie, on the run, and now we get exposition time. And it's literally like, at that point in 2.1, Reese, over the course of, like 7 minutes, basically explains the entire backstory.
Right.
This is who Arnold is. He's a Terminator. This is who I am. I'm sent from the future. There's a guy who wants you're the mother of the future of humanity. You need to be saved. I mean, he literally goes through almost all of the information that you need.
Right.
But they're doing it on the run, so it doesn't feel overly expositional. And there's a couple of things that happen in the meantime, and then Arnold finds them, and then they go on the next chase because they were parking in a parking lot, which is where we're getting a lot of this exposition. And then we go on the chase, and then right smack 50 minutes in, and this is a 100-minute movie, so literally right in the middle of the movie is your midpoint moment where they get arrested.
Right.
And so the whole plot turns, which is what we're going to be talking about after we go through these movies, which is these major moments. And so Sarah and Reese are taken in by the police. It creates a new complication for our Terminator, although it doesn't end up being that complicated for him. But he does need to, like,
absolutely,
he gets in an accident, and he like disappears from the car, right? And then he's got he's got some injuries and whatnot, and
he has to cut his eye out. It's at that moment you're like,
it's at that point, like you're like, holy shit. And also, Reese is going to be arrested, which means Sarah is in danger, and nobody believes anything that's happening to them.
Right.
So this other force of the cops being the secondary antagonist has now just changed the entire direction of the movie. This is the moment where that villain I use very loosely, good guys, changes everything, right? And Sarah's processing all of this information, but doesn't even really know what to believe. I mean, she even asked the guy, so is Reese crazy? Like she doesn't know what's going on, and yet she's seen so much. So she's battling with this internal struggle, and that's kind of one of the really fun, kind of complex aspects of her character throughout this movie, is this journey that she goes on, both in believing the truth, but also believing in herself. And you realize that this girl, who in the first half of the movie is very much doesn't really have much agency. She feels like a victim. She feels like someone who needs to run. Starting at the midpoint is when she starts to ask questions of her own in a way that feels more active. And then even she goes and helps free Reese during the police invasion. They end up escaping together, basically. Maybe he frees himself.
I think he frees himself, because I remember that moment where he stops by the window and you're like, oh, is it Arnie? Oh, no, it's Reese.
It's Reese. But there's I'm going with you. There's an activeness that she takes in that midpoint that then slowly builds over the next section of the movie. And what I noticed really during Act 2.2 is that she keeps gaining more agency and knowledge over the course of the movie. And so that's really when you're seeing the growth of this character in very small ways. Reese is injured and she does a field dressing, and she even says, that's my first one. There's a moment where Reese hands her a gun at one point.
Totally.
because he's going to go out. She helps build these bombs.
Dynamite.
She is the one when they have their sexy sex moment, because Reese spills the beans, the one piece of information that we didn't know yet, which is that he's in love with her and came back for her. And so they end up having sex in a very classic 80s style. Yes, great 80s music. But what's interesting is she's the one that initiates it. He actually goes to the bed and is like, I shouldn't have said that. In a way, so at the beginning of the movie, you see this girl who gets rejected by a guy and ends up eating in a restaurant by herself. And then in the most stressful of situations, she actually initiates the sex. And it's just all, as I'm looking at it and I'm going, wow, each of these very small moments continue to add up. She's not fully there yet, though, because she's really dumb and calls her mom. So again, it's like you're going, okay, she's growing, but she hasn't fully taken things fully to the next level,
and to be clear, she calls her mum the cabin in Big Bear or whatever it is, and then we discover that Arnie's already there,
and Arnie's on their tail. So during all of this, we're setting tension. The tension in Terminator is one of the greatest things that he does. It never lets up. As soon as we know what's happening in that, I mean, even in the first 12 minutes, the tension is there because we don't know what's happening. And then once we do know what's happening, the tension still is there. I mean, it's literally it's one of those movies that it doesn't let you go, which is actually really nice. And it's kind of a fun ride because of it. But then basically, Terminator keeps coming. Again, they get into this chase, and it's funny. There's very clearly, like almost to the minute, like 20 minutes between chase scenes, which is also interesting. It's like, okay, like we have our nice long new chase scene, but then there's like this downtime, and then, oh, he found us again, and now we have to run again. But they get into that big accident, and Reese is injured, and Sarah saves Reese. And that is a huge moment of this growth of this character. And you're not thinking about this if you're just watching this for entertainment. And this is what's great about movies, right? We as screenwriters, we can pick them apart and we can like go, oh, here's the character arc and this is how they change. But the average viewer isn't looking at that. They're just going, am I with them? And do I care? And am I enjoying this process? And why they enjoy it are those small moments. Sarah now is the one pulling Reese out of a
come on, soldier.
Right? Yes. I wrote it down. I was like, she even says at one point, on your feet, soldier. And you go, she's taking on this role. And then, of course, they end up in this robotics facility, which is very convenient, but whatever. The VFX are terrible. I really wish.
I'm sure at the time it was amazing.
Oh, they're so bad. They're so bad.
It's that moment, isn't it, where he's stripped of all of his skin. He's just the exoskeleton, and he's coming down the. And they snap the booty go. That's, you can see the map.
All the moments. Like honestly, like from the moment of the big giant bomb where essentially we don't see Arnold Schwarzenegger again in the movie. It's just the Terminator in his metal form. Every time he moves, it looks terrible. When he's still, it's fine. Or when it's like a puppetry.
When it's stop motion.
Stop motion looks really, really bad. I would love to have Cameron go back. I would love to see him go and do a Lucas with that and just redo just those VFX shots.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because when you look at Terminator 2, which was only 6 or 7 years later, it jumped so much.
It holds up. I love Terminator 2 holds up amazingly. Anyway, just going quickly in, we go into Act 3 here, and at this point, Sarah has fully taken on that role. And when Reese is facing off with the Terminator, and he's like, run, and she goes, no. And you're like, holy shit. Like literally from the moment of running to, no, I'm not going to run. And then, of course, Reese dies, sacrificing his life for Sarah. And then Sarah ultimately wins by being smart and has her good one-liner. And there's a really funny moment where I go, like the Terminator's reaching his hand through the bars, and you have this moment where it's like a close up on Sarah's face, and I'm like, is that Sarah Connor or is that Ripley? Like it's literally like the same image of this close up with her like turning her head and the thing coming at her, and I'm like, oh, Cameron likes that shot.
Absolutely.
but she wins, and then the end and the denouement is really really good because it really brings it full circle. And yes, it's half sets it up for a sequel, but the reality is,
it didn't. Also, it could have had a sequel, and if that had been a standalone film, it's great as well.
Yeah, but seeing her at the end with the sunglasses on, with her hair slightly changed, in the Jeep, in Mexico, with the dog, and you go, this woman has gone on such a journey over the course of this movie, and she's talking to John as if she's gonna try and tell him the story of the father.
Yeah.
And you go like, this simple waitress becomes the mother of the savior of humanity, and what?
And then the picture, the kid snapping the picture.
In the picture, yes.
Behind the picture, and you go, oh, she doesn't know what it is.
Yes, but we've seen it in flashbacks, and like I skipped over the flashbacks part because it's it's all expositional, really, but good exposition.
But it's interesting as well, isn't it? Because like there's a reason she has a dog. You go, oh, okay, because I saw that in the flashback, and the dogs that were barking at the Terminator, because it was a Terminator, that's why they have the dogs.
Yeah.
It's a small little
very detail. Small.
When Reese comes in, he goes in, he puts his hand up to the dog sniffs him, he's fine, but then starts barking, and then at the end you see she's got a dog, you go, oh, I know why. It's
really well crafted. You look at it on its face and you go, this is just a really simple chase movie.
Yes.
And then you really dig down into the character journeys and you go, actually, like this is a really great character arc.
Yeah.
And what's also really interesting about it is Reese, who is clearly, I mean, the secondary protagonist with maybe even at least just as much screen time as Sarah, doesn't really have much of an arc. And that's okay. Like he sacrifices himself, but he literally says at one point,
you wouldn't be surprised if he'd sacrificed himself at the beginning either.
No, and he says he came here for her. He says, I would die for John Connor. So it's the same thing.
Sure.
He's a soldier at the beginning and he's a soldier at the end.
Yeah.
And he's willing to put his life on the line for what he believes in.
Yeah.
There's one moment where he lets himself be vulnerable, which is really nice, which is when they do have sex.
Yeah.
But that's not an arc. It's a moment of wonderful kind of character, which makes us love him more.
Yeah.
But he's not the one the movie is about. And I always kind of went into it not necessarily like fully thinking that, like I always think of them together.
Yeah.
But it's really about her.
Yeah.
And so his part in it is we call these characters sometimes traveling angels.
Yeah.
His part is to help her grow.
Yeah, it's the same with Grodin in the background. So it's an interesting parallel. This character exists to help our protagonist go on the journey that they need to go on.
Yeah.
And what we were talking about earlier, this is the story that Sarah Connor needs to become the best version of herself.
Right.
If this movie didn't happen, she would still be, working as a waitress, struggling to get by in LA, dating the wrong kind of guys, and just living a mediocre existence.
And she, exactly.
Instead, she is forced to, face her fears, literally face death, and through the running of that gauntlet, become the person that.
We are somehow 49 minutes into this.
We are. That's what happens when we chat.
Because that's what happens when our writing sessions truly look like this. They're with just us a lot of times analyzing and talking. But I do want to get to how this relates to our story that we're writing right now.
Well, I suppose the core question then becomes, who is our protagonist?
I think it's the human.
I think you're probably
and I think even when we went into this idea, we were talking about them as the protagonist.
Yes.
And now, again, I don't know, is it Paul Rudd, the male version, or is it a Sarah Connor, the female version? I haven't locked onto that yet. But what I do think there is an interesting way to go from a person similar to the Sarah Connor journey in the sense of I'm an average person who over the course of this believes at least that I can do more and I am more than what I was. It doesn't necessarily mean he becomes, and she doesn't become the Sarah Connor of Terminator 2 in this movie. But her journey to get there has begun. And even more importantly, she believes that she's going to try and be that person. She's taken control of her life.
Yeah.
And so if this guy or girl is told you're going to be the Antichrist and you may be the reason humanity dies or humanity falls or the devil wins, but by the end we go, oh, actually that's not predetermined. And that by learning about himself and gaining confidence to believe that he has is this a person who just believes that he's always, like, destiny has always been in control of him and his life sucks because he has no control. And then by the end, he realizes I can take control of my life. And by doing so, that means the future is not set and that I may not be the Antichrist.
Yes. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Again, from a, what is the big theme that we're exploring through this?
Control
is
destiny.
That you can have control over your life.
I like that. In fact, even from the demon's perspective.
Even from the demon's perspective too.
Right.
It's like you can do, or you can just be a victim of circumstance.
Yes.
And it's what are you going to do? And ultimately, I feel like it's something that rings true in people's lives.
Totally. And what's interesting is
sit with your circumstances, or are you going to do something about it?
Yeah. And what's interesting about the demon's journey, because I don't think we have to go with the Terminator or Midnight Run version whereby the demon is only a traveling angel, because I actually think there's a really interesting way to have both.
I'm 100% aligned with you. I think there is something really interesting about both of them having a satisfying.
Yeah, but I do think that our main protagonist would be the human, and I do think that the demon becomes the catalyst, the Reese to the Sarah, and yet I also think the demon in ours will have much more of a arc, because I think in the same way that our Sarah Paul character will take agency and choose what they want out of their life. We've seen the demon believe that only if the angel grants them this opportunity can they be full. Only if they have a soul can they ever have a truth. And one thing you had said yesterday is maybe they don't get one. And I think that's interesting, because they could realize I haven't had a soul this entire time. I've gone on this entire journey and I've formed a bond and a connection with this person.
What do I think it is? What do I think it is to have a soul? It's really interesting.
Right.
I think as well, kind of, again, borrowing / stealing from Midnight Run, I think there's an interesting thing to explore about going, what the demon thinks should be the outcome versus ultimately what happens at the end are slightly different.
And I think
that's indicative of their arc and their journey.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure what it is yet. It needs mining. It needs poking.
Yeah, I think that those details are where we're headed probably next, in terms of who the bad guys are and what the actual twist of the outcome might be.
Totally. We were talking briefly yesterday about, if it's this angel who comes to this demon and says, I need you to do this thing, what is the thing that they're not telling our demon?
Right.
And it was interesting, again, looking at Terminator. there is information that Reese gives Sarah Connor in stages. He doesn't say, "Hey, Sarah Connor, I've always been in love with you."
Yeah.
You know,
it's slightly different because him being in love with her really has no relevance to his mission other than this is why I'm doing it. It's not plot based.
Totally. But like all the information isn't out yet.
Yes.
Like there's one big dump and there's that extra little bit of stuff to do. So I think that's interesting. And again, thinking about Midnight Run, you know, there's a moment where Charles Grodin says, "Do you want to know why I did it?" You know, well, I'm planning on blank, 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 blank. You go, "Oh, okay, you're not the criminal I thought you were. You weren't just, you know, the accountant for the mob who ran off with the money. You're an accountant for the mob who, you've got information about it. There's a whole extra stuff that you learn along the way. But it starts off being just this one simple thing, you know." Cool. It's been very good. Now, obviously, we do have other films on our list to watch, but maybe next time we won't do this again. Maybe we'll do this again in like another week and just have movies. Maybe we'll continue to. It
kind of took up the whole session,
which is great, and I think it's been really
these things. But I do think it gives us a lot of insight into the aspects of character journeys. This kind of a movie, this chase across from, in this case, multiple potential bad guys coming after us. This partnership, this team up of protagonists. You know, I love the fact that we're giving it a supernatural twist and not a sci-fi twist. I think it separates it from both of those movies in that way. I worry that by pitching it as, you know, the Terminator meets Midnight Run with a demon, I think that the demon is the Terminator. I don't quite get it.
And also, I think that it's interesting. Like when you go into it, you go, "Oh wow, I wasn't expecting that."
Right. True.
You know,
but we don't know who our Terminator is or who our mob boss is yet, and I think we do need to figure out who those people are. So I think that tomorrow our goal should be to talk antagonists
and then these opposing forces,
who are who's up against us, and yet interestingly, as you were just saying, without knowing what they're trying to do, it's a lot harder to decide who's trying to stop them. So maybe the first thing we do need to decide is what the mission is, and then we can really hone in on who are the opposing forces to that mission.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Feels like great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching or listening. If you are on Apple Podcasts, we will attempt to be back tomorrow. We'd like to try and do this on a regular basis at the same time, so it's easier for everyone to kind of enjoy, watch and know when it's going to happen.
If you want to do it live and participate in the conversation, and of course you can watch at your leisure. At any point, and any means you choose. But yeah, if you want to come and join us live, it'd be great to have you here and joining in the conversation.
Great, and that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. That's a wrap.
I'm not going to leave myself hanging this time.
All right. Bye-bye.